The Simpsons is a series acclaimed for everything it reinvented, for being irreverent and for opening the way to a more adult humor in animated series. From the hand of Matt Groening, The Simpsons quickly became a worldwide phenomenon. The series has 34 seasons, although the first seasons of the series are considered by many as the peak of The Simpsons. Even with all this, nowadays the series is far from that status. Today it is considered a series without identity or originality, due to the multiple episodes where they parody any popular series or movies. In this video we will see the reason for this change, as well as other stories that involve the series, starting in Level 1, and ending in Level 5. Level 1. This should not come as a surprise to many, since everywhere we see that The Simpsons supposedly predict many things, and even though many of these supposed predictions are false, the series does have some that are true. For example, this 2008 episode sees Homer trying to vote for Obama in the presidential election, but the machine constantly changes his vote. 4 years later, it was reported that a machine in Pennsylvania had to be removed because it changed Barack Obama's votes to votes for his Republican rival, Mitt Romney. Another example occurs when Doris can be seen using horse parts for lunch for students at Springfield Elementary. 9 years later, in Ireland, horse DNA was found in more than a third of supermarket hamburgers and pre-cooked meals. Saying that The Simpsons predict the future is a bit absurd, and yet, with the arrival of the last season, it seems that the writers are preparing an episode where they will explain why this happens. The Simpsons Shorts, or Season 0 as it is also known, are a series of animated shorts that aired as a recurring segment on Fox variety television series, The Tracey Ullman Show, for 3 seasons. After this, The Simpsons would gain popularity and have their own show. Some of these shorts can be easily found on YouTube.
I can dig it. Pit stop. Afternoon, Mr. Chupo. I'm here for my daily candy bar fix. Today, I think I shall have a chocolate cover.
The store's closed, kid. Now scram.
Hey, you're not Mr. Chupo.
I said scram!
This theory has its origin more than 6 years ago on Reddit, and is based on the themes that are dealt with in the episodes before and after 1993, that is, what happens to The Simpsons shortly before the coma and afterwards. At the end of the episode, Homer the Heretic, an episode that aired on October 8, 1992, Homer attends Mass and sits in the front row, but instead of listening to Reverend Joy's sermon, he falls asleep during the ceremony and in his dreams talks to God. Homer takes the opportunity to ask about the meaning of life, to which God answers that he will know when he dies, and also tells him that he won't have to wait long because it will happen in 6 months. 6 months later, in April 1993, in the episode, This Is What We've Come To, 18th episode of the 4th season, a joke of Bart ends with Homer in the hospital fighting with a vending machine and getting into a coma. Although in the animated series Homer wakes up when he hears the words of his son, according to a Reddit user, that never happened and everything that the character lives with his family after that event corresponds to his hallucinations. That would explain why since then, the episodes of The Simpsons are increasingly strange, and why time does not pass, the characters do not grow and Maggie still does not speak. In addition to the clear example of Lisa's intelligence and the discovery of Homer's high IQ, the rest of the family also has great genes. For example, Grandpa has been a sergeant, a pilot, a jazz pianist, an Olympic athlete and a wrestler. Fans also point out that some of Bart's jokes required great intelligence. In addition, we already discover that Maggie, at only 1 year old, plays the saxophone at the same level as her sister Lisa. On the other hand, Marge, although not a Simpson, also has great painting skills. This theory ends with a sad conclusion: most of them choose to be happy rather than enjoy their intelligence. The clearest example is Homer, who decides to reinsert the crayon into his brain. Lisa is the only one who struggles to keep his intellect, and what does she get in return? Being the least happy member of the family. There has been much speculation about a Simpsons mystery, which tells us that Maggie is most likely not Homer's biological daughter. This is attributed to supposedly official statements by Matt Groening about Marge's possible infidelity, which resulted in Maggie. There are those who think that Lenny is the real father. Some reasons that support this theory are that in the episode, Hello Mom, Hello Dad, Marge can be seen very worried when Homer tells her that Lenny is in the hospital, but too worried. Then she is seen making pillows with messages for him and a painting. In the episode, Grandpa and the Romantic Inefficiency, we can see Lenny next to Marge in Homer's gymnastics presentation, which insinuates that they had a relationship during that time. Some people also think that Maggie's real father is Kong, and just that could help with the theory that many want to believe about Marge's infidelity and Maggie's father being someone other than Homer. However, that episode is not part of the official Simpsons chronology, as it is part of the Simpsons 9 Halloween special. Even with all this, the truth seems to indicate that Homer is indeed Maggie's father. Dead Bart is a creepypasta story about a lost episode of The Simpsons in which Bart dies after falling from an airplane. The writer of the creepypasta confronts Matt Groening about a lost episode that everybody affiliated with the show refuses to acknowledge. To make this story more believable, they used images from an episode of the first season, where Bart imagines his funeral. According to the creepypasta, these images were originally the lost episode. Evidently this is false, although it was quite popular a few years ago. Level 2. There is an issue with Apu that has made international headlines, speaks to not only the wide appeal of The Simpsons, but also the grief this characterization has caused viewers of South Asian over the years. The 2017 documentary, The Problem With Apu, produced by Hari Kondabolu, discusses how the Simpsons character Apu created a caricature of South Asians, and perpetuated a stereotype that hung over South Asian kids, and followed them into adulthood. In the film, Kondabolu speaks with other South Asian about the impact of Apu on their lives. They relate childhood anecdotes of being called Apu by other children or having the characters' catchphrases from the show said to them by strangers because of their perceived heritage. The Simpsons episode, No Good Red Goes Unpunished, was widely received as a response to Kondabolu's film. In it, Marge finds that a book she loved as a child contains elements that would now be considered offensive, and edits the book herself to remove these elements. Lee Hardcastle is an animator known for a style of animation, known as claymation. With this, makes reference to pop culture, in a cruel and bloody way. Hardcastle has a series of videos about The Simpsons, but in 2015, he released what would become the most popular of his videos. This one parodies a couch gag, one of those scenes that appear in the series before each episode, only that as expected, it is not suitable for all audiences and is extremely violent. In The Simpsons, we have seen everything, even scenes that surpass reality, but what we had not realized is that the Mcbain Movie, the fictional hero played by actor and character, Rainier Wolfcastle, has been hidden in small segments throughout several of the chapters within the seasons. And it is that a user realized that in Matt Groening's series, nothing happens by chance, so that by putting together the scenes, it results in a story, somewhat cohesive. So, of course, the people of the internet collaborated to put each of the segments, creating the perfect tape. The character, full of satire and dark humor, is the classic movie Muscle Boy. According to Simpson Fandom, the series wiki, he was inspired by Arnold Schwarzenegger, although in Mcbain's film. Life in Hell was Matt Groening's first great success and the work that catapulted him to The Simpsons. It was a black humor comic strip that mocked work and love, through anthropomorphic rabbits that started as a fanzine, and ended up occupying pages in more than 200 newspapers in the United States and Canada. When they approached Matt Groening to create an animated series, it was with the intention of transferring Life in Hell to the small screen, but that agreement quickly led to the creation of a new family with which the public could identify more closely, The Simpsons. It's hard to think about after more than 700 episodes, but there was a moment in the history of The Simpsons when the show's creators were pondering how it would end. For Matt Groening, there was one last big joke before disappearing forever. Marge was going to reveal that she hides huge bunny ears under her hair, thus giving meaning to her characteristic shape, but the gag ended up discarded and locked in a drawer. The only remaining visual evidence of that Simpsons finale is a 1991 Konami arcade machine. Konami would earn the honor of having created the best game based on a cartoon by the hand of the Simpsons arcade game, the arcade machine that would bequeath us the only graphic proof of Marge's rabbit ears. Both in her main attack and when being electrocuted, the character's sprites would demonstrate in a very evident way that under that hair there were rabbit ears. The episode, Bart's New Friend, is part of Season 26. In this chapter, Homer, after working a lot, goes to a circus, where he is hypnotized for a magic trick, but before the end of the trick, the hypnotist is arrested and Homer ends up believing that he is 10 years old, which leads him to have a better relationship with Bart. The curious thing about this episode was that the plot of the episode was written 20 years before production began. It is not known what caused this delay, since the episode was not promoted as a special or something particular, just another episode of the series. Level 3. As we said, the first appearance of the family was in Tracey Ullman's show. The beginning of the first season was a Christmas episode called The Simpsons Christmas Special. The debut was a success, reaching an average of 27.8 million viewers in the United States. The numbers continued to climb and Season 2 aired the most watched episode in the history of the series, Bart in Suspense, with an audience of 33.6 million people. However, everything began to change in Season 4. According to its own writers, the episode Marge vs. the Monorail turned the show around and included more elements than the original story had. While the following seasons maintained its popularity, the bad results began to appear in the 9th season. The showrunners at the time, Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein, acknowledged that they changed the direction of the series that year because they believed it was their last season, and so they added a final episode called The Simpsons Rehash Repertoire. IMDb shared their ratings for all the episodes in a chart showing the low marks obtained by the show since Season 9. The average per year went from 8.4 in Seasons 5, 6, and 7, to a 6.1 in Season 30. While it is debatable as to the exact point where the show lost quality, the fact is that by Season 12 the ratings dropped sharply and the decline continued until it averaged only 4 million viewers in Season 29. 27 years ago a milestone in television took place, one of those that will be remembered for many years, the double episode of one of the most important series in history, The Simpsons, in which one of its characters shot Mr. Burns. The strongest thing of all was that the cliffhanger was maintained from the end of one season to the beginning of another, something unusual in a cartoon series, and even stranger in a series like The Simpsons, with self-conclusive episodes. Half of America went crazy trying to find out who was the mysterious murderer of Mr. Burns. There were many suspects: Moe, Barney, Bart, Marge, Homer, but who was the real perpetrator of the shooting? In the end it was revealed that it had been Maggie accidentally, although it was estimated for a long time that it was Barney, but a theory that emerged on Reddit could have discovered another different author of the attempted murder, and it is none other than Homer. In the image we see, it corresponds to the moment when the corpse of Mr. Burns is discovered and the whole town swirls around him. But, do you notice something strange about Krusty? The clown has wrinkles under his eyes and in his mouth, but in this image, we see a much closer resemblance to Homer. What if Homer shot Mr. Burns disguised as Krusty to frame him? One of the creators and executive producer of the series, Bill Oakley, spoke on this topic. I want to clarify that, yes, that's Homer dressed as Krusty, we haven't heard about it until now. I can imagine a scenario where Homer was mistakenly drawn in the scene and we had to have it redrawn to fix the problem, and what the cartoonists did was recycle the material and draw Krusty on Homer. As we just see, they are drawn practically the same, if we take away the color in their particular hairs. This is because, originally, there was supposed to be a twist in The Simpsons in one of its initial episodes. Krusty the Clown was supposed to be Homer Simpson in disguise, but that's not what happened in the end. Of course, Krusty is one of the great characters of The Simpsons and is arguably the biggest celebrity in Springfield. Bart loves Krusty, he is his idol, and ironically, however, Bart rarely does anything selfless for his father Homer. This was to be a key subplot in the early seasons of the series. Homer was once destined to live a double life in which he was secretly Krusty the Clown all along. Krusty's first appearance was in the Simpsons short, The Krusty the Clown Show. Bart attends a taping of Krusty's show but suspects that the host is not the real thing. Bart rips off his nose and Krusty is revealed to be an imposter, before a power outage shows Homer and Marge watching the debacle on TV. But originally, Matt Groening planned for Bart to discover that Homer was Krusty before he was changed. Darien Gore, also known as Fleebs, a fan of the series and computer programmer, has decided to bring out a creepy version of the Yellow Family for an online video game. The game is simple. You control Homer, who has to enter the house to get eggs for Bart. The problem is that the house is dark and you only have a small flashlight to illuminate the space. Not only that, but Marge, Lisa and Maggie also want the eggs, but the problem is that they are not themselves. If you manage to survive, there is a second chapter in which you will manage Flanders, who goes to investigate the Simpsons house after what happened in the first part. In 1989, The Simpsons released its first episode. Initially it was to be released in April, but the pilot had to be made again. In the episode, Marge feels rejected by Homer and decides to call a therapist from a radio show. Homer hears the call from work and takes her out to dinner at a fancy restaurant. Meanwhile, Bart, Lisa and Maggie are left in the care of a babysitter who turns out to be a delinquent. If it sounds familiar, it's because this episode was actually the last of the first season and originally aired on May 13, 1990. The animation was handled by the Klasky Csupo studio, the same studio that had animated the original series shorts. For budget reasons, part of the production was transferred to the South Korean studio, AKOM. When James Brooks, the show's executive producer, saw the pilot animation, he thought the episode looked awful, so they had to rebuild 70% of the episode. Level 4. Today it is impossible to imagine when the series will end, although we have seen that the Simpsons are no longer in their heyday. Even so, they continue to be quite profitable, so they will continue producing episodes for a long time. However, the episode Holidays of Future Past was intended to be the conclusion of the series. This is because, during that season, the rights had not been renewed to produce another one, so the producers decided to make this episode, in case it was the final one. This episode contains many memorable scenes and for many would have been an acceptable conclusion. It is well known that Michael Jackson was a fan of The Simpsons, so much so that there is a song called "To the Bartman," in which he participates, and there is even an official video of it. According to Matt Groening, Jackson co-wrote the novelty song, without receiving any credit because he was under contract with another record label. Michael would also lend his voice to the famous episode, Stark Raving Dad. This episode would be debated when it came out, about whether Michael actually sang in the series or not, and although many believe he did, the official answer is that, while he recorded the voice work for the character, all of his singing was performed by Kip Lennon. The Dark Simpsons are a parody series that takes clips from various episodes of The Simpsons, and strings them together to tell stories that are much darker than the source material, such as sex, tragedy, revenge, homicide, etc., all with things happening more realistically. It heavily relies on black comedy. Some videos are short but darker retellings of the episode or expanding on the stories. The goal is to make the most ridiculous, dark and outrageous contents possible with those clips. Phil Hartman was an actor and comedian who had a special charisma and an incredible facility for making others laugh. Specializing in impersonations, he was also a master in the art of dubbing. With that talent he shone with his own light for 7 years, during which he lent his voice to some 20 different characters on The Simpsons, including 2 that are favorites with the public, the disastrous lawyer Lionel Hutz and the controversial actor Troy McClure. His future in the world of comedy was more than promising, but misfortune crossed his path. One night in 1998, he was murdered by his wife. The death of Hartman sent shockwaves through the world of television. The Simpsons would make various tributes to Hartman, sometimes showing some of his characters in the background. Al-Shamshoon is the Arabic adaptation of the American animated series The Simpsons, intended for a Middle Eastern audience. It was produced by the media company, Middle East Broadcasting Center, and first aired in 2005. In order to adapt to the Middle East and comply with the guidelines of several governments in the region, many changes were made to the series. Some of these changes were that Homer no longer drinks beer, all references to Moe's Tavern were eliminated, certain characters were removed, and references to bacon were eliminated. These drastic changes caused the adaptation to have a short run due to low ratings. While 52 episodes of Al-Shamshoon were made, only 34 were aired, leaving 18 unreleased episodes. Because the series was not well received, Al-Shamshoon has never been released in other media. Level 5. This is another theory, which would explain and put an end to the series. As we have seen, The Simpsons have been on the verge of cancellation many times. In this case, during season 11, the episode Behind the Laughters would be broadcasted. This is a parody of the documentaries that were produced at the time in Hollywood. In this we can see how the whole series is supposedly fiction within fiction, that is, the characters are actors in their own show. This would explain how they end up in strange situations, and at the same time it would be a canonical ending, where they are simply Hollywood actors. Between fulfilled predictions, unusual characters, and obscure personalities, a question arose in many fans: how come The Simpsons never went bankrupt and Homer always has money? It is then that an obscure theory arose that points out that Homer, as the person in charge of security at the Springfield nuclear plant, is being permanently incentivized or bribed by Mr. Burns, since, as we know, Burns does not have his fortune from good deeds. The idea is that Burns would regularly contribute to his security chief's bank account to keep him productive and effective in his position, as he has been so far. In this way, Mr. Burns manages to keep the plant open with everything in order. Thus, Homer can afford to carry out his crazy adventures that would cost any other family a fortune. Another possible theory points to music. In a well-remembered episode of The Simpsons, a character named Frank Grimes appears who, despite his difficulties, manages to get a job at the nuclear plant. He begins to envy Homer for everything he has, even wondering how someone like that can have a big and comfortable house. The answer that Homer gives is royalties, since Homer was successful in the music industry with two different bands, Sadgasm and the B-Sharps. Both bands, being Homer's intellectual property, can still leave huge royalties to the family. The theory mentions that there are two reasons why Homer keeps going to work. One would be purely for show. The other, because he doesn't know that he is still earning money for those old projects and the money is accumulating in a bank account without him realizing it. This is another theory, which states that each segment presented in the Halloween specials is actually another universe, in which characters can die without altering the main line, where the other chapters take place. If we try to connect this theory with the Behind the Laughters theory mentioned before, it can also be argued that these Halloween specials are just performances, and that no characters actually die. This would also explain why there are many parodies of popular movies and series in these segments. The most recent Halloween special included a segment referencing the popular anime Death Note. This segment was very well received by fans, but beyond that, it seems that it may have confirmed one of the most popular theories of the anime. In the special we can see how Lisa finds the Death Tome, and just like in the anime, we see a Shinigami, but unlike in the anime, Lisa finally decides to kill her Shinigami in order to free herself from the Death Tome. However, in doing so, she ends up becoming a Shinigami herself. This means that the ending of The Simpsons is very different from the anime, but many speculated if this would also be the same way in the anime. Since during its broadcast, many theorized that anyone could free themselves from the Death Note if they wrote the name of their Shinigami. If it is ever confirmed that the same thing would happen in the anime, it could be said that The Simpsons predicted this as well. It is well known that Matt Groening based his beloved The Simpsons characters on his own family. The names of the characters are those of their parents and sisters, with one exception, Bart. The boy's name, conceived as an anagram of brat. We know many things about Bart, but one of the talents the boy can boast is creativity, but he also loves comedy, comics, television, and animation. As proof, there is the Emmy he won or his Oscar award for Best Animated Short Film for Angry Dad. He is also known to be considered the clown of the school, which is what he is known for. In all recreations of Bart in the future, he always appears as a failure, jobless, divorced and dependent on his family. This theory states that at the end of the series, Bart would reveal that everything was his creation, based on his family, just as Matt Groening did, so all the events that happened throughout the show were his idea.